So I figure it's about time I make a Jazz video. They're 24-5. They've won 20 of their last 21. They're 9-1 in their last 10. They beat the Clippers last night. They didn't have PG and whoever else, but still, the Jazz are rolling. And I'm mainly going to talk about the offense in this video, so to mention the defense right now. Of course, Gobert locking down the paint is still the main thing. I mean, you can go watch the Celtics game, and the amount of times the Celtics would evade Gobert was like so frustrating to watch. But besides that, I think Gobert, for one, is switching more. Two, he's stepping up onto shooters a little more often. You can check the Clippers game. He had some good closeouts in Ibaka. Ibaka still made them, but he was in his airspace. Favors is doing a pretty okay job of stepping up onto big guys, and the team overall is just rotating so well defensively. And I wish it was more complex than that, but that's sometimes what it is. Do you fight around screens? Do you collapse onto drivers? Do you close out well? Yeah, they're doing all that well. And again, it's Gobert in the middle. Anyway, if I can get to the offense now. There's a lot to get to between the swing offense and Gobert's dives to the rims and his screen setting and the three-point shooting, and Clarkson's been awesome and whatever else. But I think the first thing to mention is Conley's relationship with Gobert is a lot better. Mike Conley is back. He is the guy who we thought they were trading for last year. And the obvious thing was he had to adjust to Gobert diving to the rim all the time, as opposed to Gasol, who would spot up and prefer to pick and pop and that sort of thing. Not that Gasol never rolled, but it was a little different. And I think Conley got used to just going right to the rim off of a Gasol screen and getting the big man to commit to him and then throwing it back out to Gasol, or just finishing with a layup inside. Whereas when Gobert's there, suddenly the spacing is not as good, and Conley has done a better job of, whether it's getting the defender on his back or just taking a second longer to survey the situation and not just go straight to the basket, but take a dribble or two outside of the paint, with the idea of then forcing the big man to make more of a decision of like, well, do I go to Conley or do I stick to Gobert, who's right in front of me? And it's working. He's also been really confident from outside, and some of it is catch and shoots, but some of it too is if the big man does not step up on a screen, usually it's Gobert, sometimes it's Favors with Conley, he's just taking them. And that wasn't something he was always doing throughout his career, and that's been something with this team as a whole. Mainly Mitchell, Clarkson, and Conley. They are taking pull-up threes whenever you give it to them, and so far it's gone in at a pretty insane rate. I think the next thing you could look at is they've fixed the minutes when Gobert doesn't play. Some of that was signing Favors so the defense and the dives to the basket don't fall off. Some of that is also they just have so many good players that they don't really put bad lineups out there. I mean, they pretty much always have one of Clarkson, Mitchell, or Conley in the game. Usually it's two of those guys in the game. And then you got Bogdan and you have Ingles, who are guys who can go off the dribble and keep their drive and kick game going. And, of course, they can make shots. And suddenly it's to the point where no matter who's out there, the defense doesn't really have somebody that they can ignore. I guess Royce O'Neal and Niang and Obi would be the closest examples to that, but so far it hasn't been a problem. As long as they've got a big guy rolling to the rim, and you know, obviously Gobert's the one talked about the most, but Favors as well, it just opens up so much for this team. I mean, this is the other thing. It's the Gobert dives to the rim. It's on-ball screens, it's off-ball screens, and just every time he rolls, the defense has to commit to him. And when they do, all of these ball handlers, whether it's Conley, Mitchell, Clarkson, Ingles, Bogdanovich, although Bogdanovich doesn't exactly pass as much as the other guys do, they're noticing the right pass usually right away, whether it's a skip pass to the opposite corner, which is something that Mitchell has busted out quite a bit this year, or it's recognizing the guy in the opposite corner is open, but then making a couple of passes to get to him if the initial guy can't make the pass. To be honest, sometimes they look like the Spurs from earlier this decade, with just the way they're moving the ball around right now. I think Gobert has also made some improvements that are not super noticeable, but they are there. For example, he's comfortable now with taking one or two dribbles off of a roll to keep the possession going. I feel like sometimes if you got to him fast enough, he would just pick up the ball and not really have much to do, whereas now it can be one dribble and then pass it off to somebody, or sometimes he could just finish at the basket or get fouled. So while they don't have a superstar on offense, what they do have is a bunch of guys who can shoot and dribble and pass. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's not often that you see teams with this much of that. Like, usually teams have 2 or 3 spot shooters who can't attack a closeout and then make the next pass or be a threat to score and that sort of thing. Now, if I can talk about Donovan Mitchell specifically, I think the 2 noticeable improvements he's made are to his three-point shooting and to his passing. I've already mentioned the pull-up threes and all that. I mean, he's attempting way more threes. He's up to 8.5 threes a game on 39%, and that's great. I love that. And as far as the passing, I mean, the numbers don't suggest that he's made a huge jump, but watching him, I feel like he has. Some of it is, again, the skip passes when he recognizes the defense is collapsing on the Gobert or Favors. So I think overall Mitchell has definitely made an improvement this season. I don't think he's made the massive jump that you might have thought he was going to make after his round 1 against the Nuggets. I think it's mainly that he still just takes too many floaters, whether it's he's not fast enough to get by defenders all the way to the rim, or he just simply settles too often. But he shoots more floaters than he does shots at the rim. And as a Celtics fan, I can relate because Jason Tatum's got a bit of that going on right now too. So yeah, that to me is the one part of Mitchell's game that still needs to be adjusted a little bit. But besides that, it's still an improvement this year, no doubt. Now, if I can think about potential weaknesses for them, mainly in a playoff setting, Royce O'Neal, he's a good player. I think he does a good job of playing above his size because he's 6'4", but he's pretty strong. He's got a long as hell wingspan. But he's the one guy who's going to get a lot of minutes in the playoffs who defenses are not going to focus on as much, and we'll see if he can make them pay, whether it's three-point shooting, attacking the glass, cutting to the rim, whatever. But I just think for this team to really work without having a LeBron or a KD or a Giannis or whatever, that might be too much to overcome. One guy who the defense doesn't have to lock in on like that. The other question is when they get to the playoffs and they're facing a team who's just going to kind of switch everything, can the Jazz just beat that? They have been very good at beating switches so far, but in the playoffs, it's just a different thing. When you've got LeBron switching on to Donovan Mitchell, or Kawhi or PG switching on to him, or one of those guys switching on to Boyan or Ingles or Clarkson or whatever. Like, it's just a different thing in the postseason. We know this. And it's not just with the LA teams, but you look at Phoenix. Would Chris Paul shut down Mike Conley in a playoff series? Would Mikal Bridges give either Donovan Mitchell or Boyan or Ingles a lot of problems? I think if you're able to really bother even one guy in this Jazz team who, again, doesn't have a superstar, then you can mess up a lot of what they're doing. And as far as any opportunities for the Jazz to improve this roster, I mean, if they wanted to trade a pick, they would have to go all the way out to at least 2025 because their pick is locked up in protections for the next 4 years because of the Mike Conley trade. They will get their pick this year, but for this regular season, they can't move it. The other fear, of course, is, Gobert, playoffs, specific matchups, pick and roll, pull-up shooters, that whole spiel. We've been saying it for like 4 years now. I mean, funny enough, right now, let's say if the Nuggets won the play-in tournament, they would play the Jazz in round 1 in a 1-8 matchup. It's like, what if Jokic just drops 35 on Gobert every game? I guess you could say a similar thing with the Clippers having a stretch 5 in Ibaka. That one I'm not as concerned about, just because I think Gobert can close out onto Ibaka well enough. But Jokic is different because he can go off the dribble and all that nice stuff. Similar things with AD if the Lakers would play him at center against the Jazz. So yeah, man, we'll see. I mean, they're right in the middle of the whole thing. There's no doubt about that.